You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? Welcome back to Wrestling with Horror. My name is Andrew Dreamer. As always, I'm here to talk about professional wrestling, horror movies, and look at all the ways that they intersect, connect, and everything in between. That being said, we're taking a break from our aquatic nightmares and looking for a more scientific one. The only problem is we can't see this one. Of all the Universal monsters, I think this one is probably my favorite. I love the werewolves, the vampires, the creatures, the monsters, the disfigured opera composers. But the scientist gone mad with power and invisibility is always been my favorite one. It's the one that I always kind of gravitate towards when I'm looking for one of these movies to watch. That being said, let's take a look at the original The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man was released in 1933. It was directed by James Whale, the same man who has directed a lot of other of the Universal monster movies. He directed a lot of them. It stars Claude Rains and Gloria Stewart. Now, Gloria Stewart, if you're not familiar, she plays Claude Rains' character. She plays his fiance in this film. But the interesting thing is, this movie was released in 1933, like I said. Years and years later, in 1997, she would be in an even bigger movie, one of the biggest movies ever. She plays Old Rose in Titanic. Now, I know that that's not exactly common knowledge, but I know it's not the most obscure fact anymore, but I had to point it out because I think that's freaking cool. Now, this film is based on the H.G. Wells novel of the same name. H.G. Wells was actually alive when this film came out, so I think that's another pretty cool fact. The Invisible Man follows Jack Griffin, who has been working on all these different science experiments, and he's been experimenting with different drugs and their effects on him, and he has found a way to turn himself completely invisible. The problem with that, however, is that he is now stuck, and he does not know how to come back. He's looking for a way back, and there must be a way back.
There must be a way back. God knows there's a way back.
He enters the Lion's Head Tavern, where he's looking for solitude and a place to stay and a fire, and he just wants to be left alone while he can work on this science experiment and try to find a way to turn himself visible again. It's here where we're introduced to a character by the name of Jenny, who is played by Una O'Connor, who's also in The Bride of Frankenstein. A lot of these Universal movies, they share a lot of actors in common, and I think that's pretty cool too, because a lot of these people have played several creatures and monsters in the universe, and Una O'Connor plays this role so over the top, and it's very entertaining, and she knows how to dominate the screen when she's on it. Like I said, he wants to be left alone, but they don't leave him alone. They go and bother him, bringing him mustard when he wasn't asking for it. They go and ask him to pay his bill, which, who in their right mind would ask somebody to pay a bill when they've been staying someplace for weeks? You know, that's crazy. Why would you do that? He deserves to stay there for free, in his head at least. So after Jenny's husband goes up and demands that he pays his bill, or he is getting kicked out, he goes to try to help Jack Griffin pack his things, but Griffin does not want this to happen. He basically attacks this man with a book. He throws him down the stairs, where Una O'Connor comes in and starts screaming at the top of her lungs again. So they call the police, and that's where one of the funniest characters of this movie shows up. His name is Constable Jaffers. His name is Constable Jaffers. And he 100% reminds me of a Monty Python character. He comes in with a, "What's all this?"
Yeah, what's all this?
He goes upstairs to confront Jack Griffin, where Jack Griffin tells him, "You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you?" And they all get just scared to death when he starts unwrapping his face and shows that he is invisible. And here's where we get a very fun scene where it's just Griffin's shirt kind of dancing around the room, running around. And it's just one of the many times in this movie where the special effects are way ahead of their time. And the fact that they were able to accomplish all these things blows my mind, especially it being 1933. It was very interesting, and it's just very cool to know that they could, like I said, accomplish these things so long ago. So after he escapes from Jaffers, he goes out into the street and starts causing chaos. He throws a bicycle at people. He knocks a freaking baby stroller over and the baby goes flying out of the thing. It's insane. Looking for another place to hide out, he goes to Dr. Kemp's house. Now, Dr. Kemp is a colleague of Griffin's who's been working alongside him and Dr. Cranley, who is the father of Flora, which is Jack's fiance. When he arrives at Kemp's house, he just scares the pants off Dr. Kemp. He shows that he's invisible. We see him sitting down on this chair, and we just kind of see his butt imprint go down on the chair, and it's just another example of how these effects were way ahead of their time. He basically forces Kemp to go with him back to the tavern to retrieve his books, and so he can continue his experiments. And while he's there, that's when he kills his first person. He kills this police officer who's downstairs, and basically saying that this is all a hoax. He kills him, and he smashes this dude with a chair right in the face so hard that it kills him. And this one chair shot would have got a good scream out of good old JR. Back at Kemp's house, Kemp decides to betray Griffin, which is gonna end up biting him in the butt. But he betrays Griffin, and he calls Dr. Cranley and Flora, but he also calls the police and tells them that Griffin is in his house. So Dr. Cranley and Flora show up, where Flora gets to try to talk some sense into Griffin, but it doesn't work. He tells her that they're going to rule the world together, that nobody can stop him. And this is when the police show up, and he escapes again. But before he does, he tells Kemp that he will kill him in 24 hours. He's basically promising to absolutely come back and just destroy this man. He doesn't like disloyalty. It's here where Griffin goes on just a massive killing spree. He kills several people, including derailing an entire freaking train. He derails this entire train and kills 100 people in one fell swoop. And he also makes good on his promise to kill Kemp, because later on he escapes from the police once again, and the police are trying to protect Dr. Kemp, but he's kind of going off on his own in his car, and he thinks he's got away. He's happy, he's excited, he thinks he got one over on Griffin, but that's not the case, because Griffin is in the back seat, and he tells him, hey, I told you I was coming for you. And so what he does is he does kill Dr. Kemp, but the way he does it is just so insane for the time, because he basically locks Kemp in the car and he forces him to drive it off a cliff. The car literally just careens off this cliff. We get an explosion. And again, it's just something else that was insane to think about them doing in 1933. From here, Griffin decides to hide out in a barn that he finds, and there's now, throughout the entire movie, there's a lot of snow. It's wintertime, it's cold outside, so he hides in this barn and he lays down on a pile of hay. Now the farmer kind of sees him and he calls the police. So the police show up, they surround the place, and they set it on fire. And this draws Griffin out, of course, because, he doesn't want to be burned alive. He comes out, they see his footprints in the snow, and they start shooting at him. And it hits him, he falls to the ground, and that he ends up in the hospital. Laying in the hospital bed, Flora comes in to be by her fiance's side. She still loves him. She still wants to be with him. But it's here where we get our one and only look at Jack Griffin's face, because as he dies, the effects of the drug, which is called monocaine, which I'll explain a little bit. Monocaine, throughout the movie, they describe as a bleaching agent. It takes the color out of things, but what Griffin doesn't know is that it drives whoever uses it mad. Now, this is a fact that Cranley knew because he read it in some obscure textbook years ago, but Griffin would not know because that book was very hard to find and he wouldn't have ever read it. So that's why he was unaware of the effects of monocaine and what it would do to him as he injected it under his skin. But as he's dying, the effects of the drug wear off, and we get our only look at Jack Griffin's face here. And that is where our movie ends. Now, we're going to get into some of the positives and negatives, and like always, I'm going to start with the positives. Obviously, the main positive here is going to be the extremely powerful performance by Claude Rains. They chose him because of his voice. Now, because, in a role like this, you have to convey all of the emotion and all of the fear and anger and anguish. Everything has to be conveyed through your voice. So they wanted somebody with an extremely strong voice, and Claude Rains was perfect for that role. Like I said, we only saw his face the one time at the very end of the movie. Another positive for me are going to be the amazing special effects for 1933. Like I said throughout the video, they are just so ahead of their time. They're amazing. They look great. They hold up. And now, obviously, there are going to be some moments where it looks kind of cheesy. You can tell that there are some cuts, there's some wires here and there. but it doesn't really bother me much. The effects to me are they're phenomenal for the time. Also, this film has a very compelling story. I think it's a tragic story. It's a man looking for scientific ways to make himself invisible. He's not a bad person. He's a person who got overly anxious with science, and he messed with some things that he shouldn't have been messing with, and it ruined his life. It's a very tragic story. It's tragic in that his fiancée is left alone at the end. She is distraught. She is destroyed. And just a very compelling and tragic story. And the last positive I'm going to say is that this film is not overly long. It does what it needs to do, and it ends. It doesn't pad the runtime with a lot of unnecessary things like a lot of movies today do, but it just gets to the point and it's over. And it's a positive for a lot of these old Universal movies because a lot of them kind of clock in around an hour, maybe a little more, and I really appreciate that. It helps when you're trying to watch a lot of movies, and it makes the watch so much easier when you know that they're just going to get to the point and be done. Transitioning to the negatives now, like I said earlier, you can see some wires in some scenes. You can see that it's kind of cheesy looking with his shirt dancing around. Doesn't really detract from a lot of the movie for me. I still really enjoy the movie, but I got to throw that in there just because you can see some wires and some of the ways that they accomplish some of this. Some of it doesn't age the best, but overall it's still really good to me. Another thing is at some points in this film, the audio gets so loud that it kind of hurts your ears if you're not careful. And that's just a product of the time as well. It's not anything that they did wrong. It's just the audio devices that they had in 1933. That's just the effect that they have when you have so much screaming and yelling going on. And the cause of a lot of those audio issues are going to be Jenny, played by Una O'Connor again. She's so loud with her screams, and it just goes on and on and on, and it just it's fun at first, it's funny, but then it kind of gets aggravating after a little while. So that is kind of my last little negative, and that is The Invisible Man from 1933. There is a modern remake, there's plenty of other ones, there's plenty of sequels to the original, but this is the one I wanted to focus on. This is the one that is my favorite of the Universal Monster movies, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. I really enjoy this movie. Maybe down the road I'll look at all the other Universal movies. I might even do that this October, kind of just throwing some ideas around. Just thought of that on the spot, actually. But that being said, let me know what you think about this movie down in the comments. Do you like this take on The Invisible Man? Do you like the novel better? Is this your favorite of the Universal monsters? Which ones do you like better? Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, heck, even the Phantom of the Opera? Let me know. I really want to know what you all think. And before I go, if you're looking to save 20% off your order at redcon1.com, make sure you're using code AndrewDreamer at checkout. You'll save 20% and it'll be a huge help to me. I would really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. Turn your notification bell on. Leave a thumbs up on the video. Leave a comment down below. All of the interaction helps me a ton. I can't thank you all enough for all of the support. But until next time, my name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.